internationally known, locally respected. It is your boy BT, Brennan Taylor, and I'm coming back to you guys once again with another world-class video, with another more world-class boxing talk. And these are going to be some of my final thoughts on Moses Itauma heading into his big fight, Philip Hrgovic, tomorrow night, right here in London at the O2 Arena. And yes, I'm here in London in an undisclosed location in a park. But nonetheless, let's talk about Moses Itauma because there's a lot to talk about. Now, I gotta give it to the British boxing establishment. They got the Moses Itauma hype machine to the highest degree. And I like Moses Itauma. I like Moses Itauma. I've been hip to him. I've been knowing about him, and I've been talking about him, and I've been making videos about him here on YouTube since before, you know, most people in American boxing media. So I rate him highly. I like him. When you break him down as a fighter, what's not to like? He's entertaining. He's got a lot of speed. He's got some of the best speed we've seen from a heavyweight in years. And he's not just some Neanderthal. He's a thinking fighter. He has an educated lead hand probe. He's a two-fisted fighter, so he's not just spamming and throwing the same punch over and over again. There's a lot of green flags and great things I could say about Moses Itauma. However, I'd be remiss in I'd be acting like everybody else in boxing media if I didn't highlight some of the glaring red flags that are there. All right, so let's talk about it. And I'm gonna make an analogy later in the video, but let's talk about it. So first and foremost, we'll start with the boxing, and then we'll get into the mental side, and then we'll get into like just other stuff, right? So let's start with the boxing. First and foremost, Moses Itauma, for all the speed and power and IQ that he's shown fighting the limited opposition he's fought so far, one thing that I think is very alarming to me is just how much energy Moses Itauma has expended in a lot of these fights. And let me explain what I'm talking about. When he was fighting Jermaine Franklin, when he was fighting like a Dillian White and guys like that, there were just times where Moses will do certain moves where he doesn't got to do that. You know, I feel like he does waste a lot of movement, especially in the Franklin fight. In the Franklin fight, that was a particular fight where Moses had to stop him around that time because Moses didn't really have any proverbial bullets coming his way. And he was laboring. He had moments where he was laboring in there, but you know, most people didn't see that. And so there's that aspect of it. And then, you know, he's a guy that likes to jump in and jump out, and those are things that I think play a role in him burning up more stamina than he should be. Also, too, when he jumps in and jumps out, mind you, he's not jumping in and jumping out with his hands up or his head out the line. He's jumping in and he's jumping out with his head on the center line, with his lead hand down. So there were moments in that Franklin fight, not many moments, but a couple moments where, you know, Franklin was able to capitalize on that and land good counter shots. But, you know, Franklin doesn't have that big of a punch, and Franklin's not, you know, throwing that many punches to begin with. He wasn't the Jermaine Franklin of old, that's for sure. So that being said, you know, it's a different proposition when you're talking about a 6'2" Jermaine Franklin versus a 6'7" Philip Hrgovic, who, by the way, is in seemingly the shape of his life. You know, looks great. But so I look at Moses Itauma's ability to of how he's expending his energy, of how he's not being economical, and I can see that being very problematic for him in this fight, because if we're just being honest about it, he never had to go through the gears and go through the learning curve of actually having to learn how to be economical and use his energy. And I would say for fighters, that's the biggest thing. When you go from prospect to contender to championship level, that's probably one of the top the top traits you're gonna have to learn, is the ability to pace yourself, the ability to be economical when it matters. And he has had to do that. So that makes the fight with Hrgovic that much more intriguing. And look, even if he were to get by Hrgovic, which, you know, I have some doubts about that, but if he were to get by Hrgovic, even then, it could cost him other fights against other fighters with different styles. So I could see a scenario. Part of me does feel like, you know, the UK establishment is so desperate for a star that they're putting so much on this kid. I mean, at the press conference yesterday, you had reporters mentioning quotes from Nassim Hamed. Apparently, Prince Nassim Hamed is going around saying that Moses is better than he was, and all this stuff. He's the next this, he's the next that. He's got Nike commercials already. He's got a Nike endorsement deal. And look, we're all humans. We're all humans. We're all humans. If enough people tell you you're great long enough, you're gonna believe them and start to buy into your own hype. And from my now that I've been here, now that I've actually been part of it, we're almost to fight night, so we've completed the majority of fight week already. I can honestly say I do sense that a bit from Moses, that there is a part of him. While I think he is probably trying to be humble, because he does strike me as a nice kid. It's just hard when you're 21. I mean, I remember when I was 21, it was hard for me to understand certain things, and I'm sure there's certain things that are hard for him to understand right now. And there's so much being put on his shoulders, where I feel like, like the old saying goes, they hail you to nail you. They're hailing him as this, they're hailing him as that, and should he lose this fight or a fight, the next fight or the fight after that, they're going to be calling him a hype job. They're going to be saying he's the Michael Grant of the UK, and they're going to be putting him there with Ali Harrison and things like that. So I just feel like they're putting a lot on the kid, and I do believe that he does believe some of his own press clippings, because, like I said, I'm over it. Like, you guys actually, like, a lot of you out there really care if you guys think that I really care if I get interviews with certain fighters. I don't. Like, I'm not chasing these fighters around. If they want to talk, we can talk. But if not, then it is what it is. I've interviewed a lot of fighters, so it's not like if I lose one, my life doesn't end. There's so many fighters and so many great stories out there that I can go talk about and make videos about and do just fine. That's why we're still here almost 11 years later, with being one of the leading voices of independent boxing media, because I didn't need one fighter to make my channel a success. I talked about plenty of fighters, but Moses hasn't really promoted this fight at all. I mean, this fight's on pay-per-view. They're price gouging the boxing fans all around the world on DAZN, putting on a pay-per-view. He hasn't promoted this fight at all. He went in the ring the other day. He shadow boxed. Like, he threw like 3 jabs, did his shoe shine, saluted the crowd, and got up out the ring. So, like, he's giving you less than even the bare minimum, and that's saying something in this day and age of boxing for the media workout. Then at the press conference, he's not really like, he didn't really talk to anybody. Like, and the thing is, I'm not surprised, and I'm not mad about it, because, like I said, I'm detached from caring about that stuff. But the saying goes, how you do one thing is how you do everything, and it does give you kind of like a glimpse into what his psyche might be. I've made it. What did he tell Herkovich? Give him my props. Props for what? You didn't fight anybody yet. You fought the corpse of Dillian White. Give me my props. The next British Mike Tyson. All this. A lot of my colleagues here in British boxing media, they told me, they said, BT, when you come to the UK, Moses ain't gonna give anybody any time. He's gonna come in, he's gonna talk for 5 seconds, and he's gonna dip. And that's exactly what happened yesterday. So again, I think there is a sense of, from Moses Itauma's end, that he has kind of made it, and that he has already arrived. And he wasn't. Let's be real about Moses and why he is here. Let's be real about him for a second. Moses is here because he was a really good amateur on the British scene, and you could say even like the European youth level, but he was never an AIBA world champion in the amateurs, which is the second biggest thing you can win in the amateurs. He was never that. He didn't represent Great Britain in the Olympics. Nope. Wasn't an Olympian, didn't medal. So my thing is, he never really proved to be a truly elite amateur on the world level. When he sparred a lot, and I've heard all these sparring stories, good and bad, about Moses from many people in the UK. And you fought who you fought so far. So basically, they think that this kid is so special that he's just going to be this thing right away. And maybe he will. Maybe he is one of those guys that comes around once in a while and is like that. But my thing is, it does cause some concern. And I've seen a lot of my friends in America, and this is and I know I've been waffling on, but I'm trying to make you guys, I'm building up to a bigger point here. So please just bear with me. A lot of the boxing community back in America that does like Moses, because he kind of has like an American style, the way he lets his hands go. He kind of fights like the old Americans used to fight, and that's a compliment, So a lot of American fans that are hardcore fans have taken a liking to Moses Itauma already. But I've seen people compare Moses Itauma to LeBron James, and Michael Jordan and Julius Erving and all these different basketball players. People are making basketball analogies. So perfect. Perfect. You know, for those of you that don't know, I covered the NBA for 2 years before I even covered boxing. Right out of high school. Covered the you know, interviewed Steph Curry, interviewed Kemba Walker, interviewed Vince Carter. So, you know, I love basketball. I love basketball. And I have my own basketball analogy I want to give for Moses Itauma. LeBron James, he is not. Michael Jordan, he is not. And because of his approach to everything and how he complains and has this he has this very like standoffish ego, you know, they'll never give him my credit, give him my props. He's always complaining about stuff. Moses reminds me of Ben Simmons. You guys remember Ben Simmons? I'm talking about Ben Simmons before he got the NBA. Remember, you guys remember Ben Simmons at LSU when he was a young guy, and they were saying that Ben Simmons was going to be the next LeBron James, which now is hilarious. It sounds funny to say, but it was a thing. So much so to the point where LeBron James' agency signed Ben Simmons, Clutch Sports signed Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons actually posed on Slam magazine, the biggest basketball magazine in America, and they did the exact same cover that they did for LeBron James when he first got drafted. So it was a thing. And I remember vividly 10 years ago when Ben Simmons was at LSU, and Ben Simmons wound up you know, going #1 overall. But when he was at LSU and he was at college for his 1 year, they had Showtime. They did a documentary about Ben Simmons, and in the documentary, Ben Simmons was crying and complaining and moaning all the time about going to class and going to college. So there was always this feeling, even back then with Ben Simmons, that for as talented and as gifted as he was as a point guard with his court vision and his ability to play make for other teammates and pass the ball, you know, his mentality and his lack of a jump shot ultimately got him out the league in 7 years. He made like the All-Star team 2 times. He didn't have a long career. He didn't even play long enough to get the full maximum NBA pension, which requires 10 years. He was out of the league in 7 years. And this is a guy that was supposed to be the next LeBron James. He's been out of the league for years now. LeBron is still going. So LeBron James, he is not. So I pivot back to Moses Itauma, and that's who he reminds me of. Now, is he going to be like Ben Simmons? I don't know. Time will tell. But that's who his temperament reminds me of. Even like they got the same damn complexion. You know, the same complexion. Yeah, it's just that whole thing with him. And another thing I'll say is this, right? Because we've seen this movie before with British fighters, you know. Now, I know American heavyweight boxing is absolutely trash. We got nobody right now. We're sorry. I acknowledge that here on British soil. But inevitably, you know, and maybe I'm wrong, but inevitably, Moses Itauma is probably going to want to fight in America. Most Brits want to fight in America. All of them did. Anthony Joshua, Prince Nassim Hamed, Tyson Fury, the list goes. Even Daniel Dubois fought in America at one particular point against Trevor Bryan, right? So my thing is this: whether, you know, if Moses Itauma ever comes to America, I'm telling you right now, with all due respect to some of my colleagues in the British media, you know, the American boxing media is way tougher than the British boxing media. I'm sorry, it just is. And the way they're coddling him, and when I say they, you know, I mean Queensberry. You know, they're like he didn't stay at all yesterday. Like this is supposed to be a pay-per-view fight. You know, you're in the hurt business. Sure, there's some ads on some double-decker buses, and you know the fight, from what they say, is selling well. I don't know how much those tickets are actually selling or how much are comps, but what I'm saying is, if Moses already hates doing media now, and he can't handle a couple of tough questions now, and he doesn't want to promote his fight now, I'm telling you, there's going to come a point where he's not going to be fighting in England. He might come to fight somewhere like America, and he's going to deal with real media pressure and real questions and people that aren't overly impressed by him because, again, I love the UK, but let's just be honest. The standards for between American boxing and British boxing are on a different level. Dave Allen is a star. Dave Allen is relevant in the UK. A guy like Dave Allen would never, ever have a snowball's chance in hell of being relevant in America. But because it's just different mentalities when it comes to boxing. Doesn't mean that the UK doesn't produce great fighters, because they do. But I'm just saying it's different. And I really do feel like the British boxing establishment is setting Moses Itauma up for like a huge failure. Like, and look, I'm not even saying it might not be this fight. You know, I like Hrgovic. I like to see Hrgovic win. But if it isn't this fight, it may be a fight down the road. And I'm not preying on his downfall. Let me be very clear. I'm not preying on Moses' downfall. I don't know him. I never met him. I quite like him as a fighter, and I think he is a nice kid. But like I said, we're all humans, and if enough people tell you you're great for long enough, and that you're this and you're that, it's gonna seep into your subconscious. You understand? So I think they really are setting the kid up for a big time failure, and the British boxing media is gonna turn on him if he loses. If he loses to Hrgovic, or let's say he fights Frank Sanchez next, or Dubois, they're gonna turn on him. They're gonna say, oh, he wasn't this, he wasn't that, you know. And then what? Then what? Now a guy that could have truly been a great fighter, because he was rushed, because the British boxing establishment was so eager to create a star out of thin air, because British boxing, you know, Anthony Joshua is on his way out the door, Tyson Fury is on his way out the door. There's not a whole lot of stars. Like right now, 10 years, almost 10 years after 2017, because 2017 British boxing was popping. I remember it. 2017 British boxing was great, but it's not 2017 anymore. And they're gonna try to create a star, a superstar, by hook or by crook. And for me, I feel like they're just putting way too much on him. They're heaping too much praise on him, and it's not good. It's not good for him. It's not good for his development. It's not good for it's just not good. And like I said, Filip Hrgovic, he's been the opposite. I'll talk about him more later, but just touch on him briefly. He's the complete opposite of Moses. He has never had any of that, and he's actually had to prove and earn every last little stripe he's gotten in this heavyweight division. And he's taking his fight insanely serious. He's looking like he's in the greatest shape of his life. And what's gonna happen if at any point in this fight, if Hrgovic takes Moses to a place he hasn't gone to, and because Moses thinks that he can just hit somebody and they'll fall over because everyone says he's the next British Mike Tyson, what happens if he doesn't? What happens if Moses fails? What happens if that? Now people are gonna say he's a hype job, he's this, he's that. But really, he didn't do anything wrong. He was an ambitious young kid who wanted to prove himself. And these people in British boxing wanted a superstar so badly, so they try to fast track this kid, thinking that they knew what they were doing, and they may or may not know what they're doing, and his career may be a casualty of that. So I say all that to say he just reminds me of Ben Simmons in basketball. Same thing, and you know what's crazy? Same thing with the Sixers, man. The Sixers, like, they coddled Ben Simmons a lot when he was on the team, and he didn't develop the way he was supposed to. And he left a lot on the table, and he fills it out very quickly because they were saying he's the next LeBron James, and he believes all this stuff. So I know I'm all over the place, but I had to get this out there because I've been marinating on it all week. Moses is a very young fighter, very dynamic. And listen, it's very possible that this video ages terribly, and maybe I'm reading into it the wrong way, and maybe Moses is just gonna dominate the heavyweight division. He's gonna ice Filip Hrgovic, he's gonna ice Frank Sanchez, he's gonna ice Daniel Dubois, he's gonna ice Teremana. He's just gonna ice everyone. All that stuff I'm talking about doesn't matter because he's just that special. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't know. I've just seen this movie before, and it's never good in life, especially in boxing, when you start reading into your own press clippings, your own hype, buying into your own hype too early. You know, and I definitely think, now that I've seen it with my own eyes, I definitely think that's what's happening. So we'll see how it happens on Saturday, but I'll leave it at that.